Good morning, good morning. So, diversity. Now, there was a panel debate on this stage last year around diversity, and the big question was asked, why are we still talking about diversity? Why is progress so incredibly slow? Well, let's push that conversation a little bit further. So please welcome to the stage, supporting me and being the panel today, please welcome EJ. Please come up and join me, EJ. So EJ is the VP of UK and Ireland for Genesys. EJ is very passionate about diversity and really giving opportunities to those that are underrepresented in the business. So one of the stories that EJ shared with me when we first met was that when she first joined Genesys, she changed her name on LinkedIn to Peter. And that was to really highlight the lack of diversity at that time within Genesys. Please also welcome to the stage from Twilio, Camelia, who is the Senior Manager Solutions Engineer within the contact center. Thank you, Camelia. So Camelia has a software engineering background, 20 years experience in the contact center industry, and is part of the initial leadership group that created the Women in Solutions Engineering chapter at Twilio. Thank you, Camelia. Please welcome Anna Crowley, who is the Chief Human Resources Officer at Avaya. Isn't this great? We've got Genesys, we've got Twilio, we've got Avaya on stage. Anna was, so you've been in education, you've been in travel, you've been in utilities, you're now in tech. You've lived in countries all over the world. That's really quite diverse. And you're about to launch the Avaya United ERG, and that's chaired by the new CEO. So lots of exciting stuff going on there. And you're really leading the charge at Avaya around diversity. Fab, thank you so much. And last but not least, and in addition to what's on your printed agenda, Vicky Nisbet, who is the UK&I Comms, Media, Sports and Gaming and High Tech at Salesforce. Vicky, please join me. So quite different. Vicky has a law degree and has many years in tech from SAP and Oracle, now at Salesforce. And you are also the chair of the Equality Board for the UK and Ireland and member of the Diversity and Inclusion Board at the TM Forum.
Yes, I am.
So thank you very much for joining me. Anyone spot the elephant in the room?
It shouldn't be me.
So clearly, on the face of it, you're looking at a stage with 5 women on it. How diverse is that? Diversity isn't just about what you look like. It's not just about your gender or your race or your religion. It's so much deeper than that. Diversity is about being different. For me, it's about celebrating those differences. And it was really interesting listening to Bruce earlier talk about community. And I want to try and draw a little bit of that and think, well, diversity and community, do they work together? Some of you in the room will know that I've got 14-year-old twins, boy and a girl, and no, they're not identical if you're wondering. And I've always promoted to them individuality. When my daughter was 11, and she was selected to swim for her squad in a national competition, and they were all given little stick-on tattoos. And I noticed that my daughter wasn't wearing hers, and so I was thinking, oh my goodness, what's wrong? Why doesn't she want to wear her tattoo? And I asked her, why aren't you wearing your tattoo? And she turned around to me and said, because I'm unique. I thought, okay, I'll take that. What was really interesting was that team went on to win that year, and although they were a team that, on the face of it, looked incredibly similar, they all brought different strengths to the team. One was a breaststroker, one was a backstroker, one was a fly, one was freestyle. They were all different, even though they looked very similar. For me, this is about celebrating difference. And if you are comfortable in that community that you are in, then you're more likely to thrive. And and being different in a community where you can thrive, that team can do amazing things. So you might have heard, it's been going around a little while now, the Google initiative, hashtag I am remarkable. And that's really about empowering those underrepresented groups to celebrate their achievements in the workplace and beyond. So I'm going to come to the panel, and let me start with, how are each of you different? How are you remarkable? And what have you done today that you are really proud of? I'm going to start with you, please, Anna.
I knew you were going to do that. It's remarkable, first of all, that I managed to get here and follow Apple Maps, because I'm notoriously bad. I'm okay in a car, but when it's on foot, for some reason I can't figure it out. Remarkable that I'm also here when I've got 2 kids back home. I'm a single parent. I manage my career regardless in different countries with them. The house flooded last night, which my Avaya colleagues have been listened to, and spent the night trying to figure out emergency plumbers, get the kids still to school, save the dogs from drowning. So it's been one heck of a night and one heck of a morning. So I think I appreciate how different people are, because we assume that everybody is having the same struggles as ourselves, or the same simplicity as ourselves. And like I said, getting here, following Apple Maps, is probably the greatest achievement, never mind the plumbing and everything else, just because I'm not a tech person, which will come out as we keep the conversation going.
Thank you, Anna. Vicky?
I love the hashtag I'm remarkable, by the way, and I recommend everybody does that as a session. As for how I'm different, you mentioned I've had many years, which makes me feel ancient, but yeah, many years in sales, and I think I have spent most of that career being different. And when I started, I worked for a software sales organisation that was part of a bank. And so it was really run by bankers, and they didn't know. I actually had comments of they didn't know what I was there for. It was really just like, was I there to make the coffee? Because you just stood out. It was all very white and male. So that is the way I would say I've been different. And as for the I am remarkable, I actually use this every week with my team when I'm doing forecasting. I make everybody at the beginning of the meeting say I am remarkable because, and it changes the whole dynamic of the meeting. So my remarkable today is stepping back and letting somebody else get on the tube before me, because they were kind of smaller than me and getting pushed and shoved and out of the way. So that was my remarkable for today.
Thank you. Now, EJ, or should I call you Peter?
Whichever you feel comfortable with. So, and I answer to both. So, yeah, I guess first of all I'm going to say I'm remarkable because I can get ready in 10 minutes, in less than 10 minutes. Don't have to put makeup on and can be out the front door as a working mum. And I would say, why am I different? I've worked, in the industry for so long, very used to turning up to meetings and being the underrepresented in those sessions. I have to say I'm delighted, first time in my career, I hosted a leadership meeting and it was the other way around. And I feel like small gains are really making a difference.
Perfect, thank you. And Camelia?
How am I different? Well, I've been working in the industry for over 20 years. I am a technical leader, not just working in tech, but I am technical and I want to stay technical. I want to be able to help my team with technical challenges and complex problems. And for as long as I'll carry on working in the industry, even if I am in a leadership position, I want to be able to keep close to the ground.
Perfect.
Something remarkable today, well, I came here with 2 of my team, and we got here early in the morning to get ready to be able to do some demos. So I think that was quite remarkable to get here, not just get ready for this session, but just generally to be able to be prepared for the day.
And for some, just getting here, trusting trains was probably an achievement. So we normally recognise the word diversity with the term inclusion. We're more increasingly seeing diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging. And how often do you see on your job descriptions and your employers saying, we are an equal opportunities employer committed to diversity in the workplace? Anna, what does this all mean?
I mean, diversity, it's been a buzzword for a long time now. And I think when you're in the US, when you're looking at it globally, it tends to be the macro differences that people look at, as you mentioned before, what you can see. And we create, we talked about earlier communities, but employee resource groups, call them what you are, but they're usually macro groups and focused on macro problems, if you like. But what we tend to miss is more of the micro and diversity of thought, diversity of environment people are coming from, whether that's socioeconomic or whatever their life story is. And we don't put enough focus there. So when we talk about diversity, it is difference. It's difference in the smallest of ways and the largest of ways. But the inclusion and the equity are highly important, because we have these biases that we lean towards people that look like us, even in a ethical or moral, or even when it comes down to which football team you support, for example, you instantly have a leaning. It's a mirror and you're attracted to it, unfortunately. That means then in the workforce, and I challenge anyone to look at your environment and not see this, you will tend to look to pull the same people again and again into projects. You might look at the same people again for uplifting them in the environment and not necessarily looking outside your norm. And so that equity becomes very important, because without that, people feel sidelined. Whether that's real or not, it's a perceived sidelining. So creating that equitability and then allowing people to feel included, that's what drives the belonging. If I don't feel that I'm part of it, then I don't feel like I belong. If I don't belong, what am I doing here? How can I trust you? How can I give my all? How can I be myself? And that's really what the diversity word comes down to. You know, it's moved along, and I think there's more progress being made, as we mentioned, but there's a lot of work to do, but looking at it in different ways, in diverse ways.
And it's really interesting that it seems like there's a bit of a problem in the mix. Prince Harry talked about unconscious bias. I don't know if you've seen that the Brits are about to announce the winners, and they're trying hard. They had Best Female Artist, then they had Best Male Artist. They've now brought the two together, and they've now got Best Artist, and this year the 5 finalists are all men. We are trying hard, but is there this unconscious bias? And, you know, is it about time that we called it out and didn't really shy away from it? Vicky, what's your thoughts?
I think it's a bit of an oxymoron, actually. I think if we're honest and we have a safe psychological space, then we all have bias. We can't help but have influences on our childhood, the socioeconomic influences, people around us. But to suggest that those biases are unconscious once you're conscious of them is just an excuse for bad behavior, in my opinion. So I don't think we should judge people for having these things, but I think it's important that once you recognize that, you make a choice as to how you want to behave and how you want to include people in it. And at work, it's about having an open environment. I was in like a breakout on a Zoom, you know, and I ended up with one guy who was probably my age, maybe a bit older, white, and our topic was women's experience in the workplace. And it started out just the two of us. Whoever else probably went off to make a cup of coffee or something like that. And he started off by saying, fair enough, but why is it called a women's experience? Why isn't it just experience? And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, look at Salesforce. We've got 50% representation at the board in the UKI and women. We've solved it. We've done it. It shouldn't be women's experience anymore. It should be women's experience. I then sort of put my head in my hands a little bit and slowed right down and went, well, it might not be about that. And I think it was good for him to be able to say that, because then we went into a conversation as to how these little things change, but actually it's a journey. It's not a destination. We're not going to get there and say, tick, we've achieved diversity and inclusion. But it's important that he was comfortable enough to call out his bias, which was still raging there within him. But he went away from that meeting understanding what it's like to be a woman, and therefore being far more open in the work environment as to the impact of his behaviour and the behaviour of others that might have on somebody underrepresented.
And maybe it's education, maybe it's opening the eyes. And I mean, I've been in conversations where I've had my eyes opened. You know, I've got a stepdaughter who's 23, and she introduced me to the world of they. And you know, that was new to me, and I'm very aware of the fact that I'm learning. Is it all about education, EJ?
Yeah, I genuinely believe that education is a real fundamental part to, if we really want to make a change. I also think that it kind of starts with the leaders. So all of us have a responsibility to drive diversity, and it's not just the female diversity, it's the full plethora. And I think, creating open conversations, actually taking time out as an organization to look at this unconscious bias, because you quite rightly say, as soon as it becomes conscious, it's kind of like an excuse. And I don't think we invest enough in it. I don't think we put enough time into it. And I think there's still an awful lot that you as individuals can do to help create that safe space, which is why I kind of got into it, because it's so easy to sit on the side and kind of go along with the flow, or actually go put yourself out there and change your name to Peter and create a discussion, because it becomes part of the education.
So beyond, and we've all talked about it from being from the female perspective and some of the physical attributes, but beyond that, and don't get me wrong, organisations need to be embracing all of that, and that has to go without saying, surely these days. But beyond that, what other ways should we be adopting diversity in our organisations? I mean, Camelia, what are you seeing in the IT, real solutions engineering piece? Where is the diversity? What is the kind of diversity that you're looking for?
Well, diversity of thought and ideas is extremely important. One example I can give you, and something that I try and work on every day, in pre-sales, in solutions engineering, we work with sales reps, right? Non-technical people. They will go into a customer meeting saying, this is a business meeting, we don't need a techie with us, we don't need an SE with us, because we're just going to talk about business. I'm trying to work on changing this mentality. It's extremely important for your solution or pre-sales engineer to be in that conversation. It's extremely important for developers to have the chance to speak with the customers, because that's how you end up with really great product. When the software engineers and the IT people and the technical people who will ultimately design the solution actually see it firsthand and are there, even though they might not say much, but they listen and they take actions later on.
And do you know what, that whole piece around the product design, I do want to pull that out, and probably earlier than I planned, but I want to pull that out because it's quite widely recognised that some of the early product design was done by men. And therefore that diversity of thinking may not have been there. We talk about seatbelts these days is a great example, but as we look forward and we're looking at the kind of solutions that we're developing for the customers that are incredibly diverse, how do you bring that into your mix? How do you make sure that you're getting that diversity of thinking? EJ, what's your thoughts from a product development perspective?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have every representation in your product design. And you're right? If we look at that natural language, I'm sure it did start with a very typical stereotype. But, let's look at Alexa, right? She's a female, maybe, and so I think that evolution definitely there. But if you kind of want to get the best design, then absolutely you need to be looking at the full 360 rather than just kind of, a conscious bias to one side, right?
And are you guys as technology organisations, are you investing in making sure that you've got that investment at the product design level? I'm going to ask you, Camelia.
Absolutely we do. So it's not just about when we talk to customers about the solutions they need, the solution we might design for them, but ultimately on the actual product, the base level product design. I had a conversation with my son the other day, who happens to be an English literature student, and he's in a minority. He is, probably less than 20% of his colleagues are male, the rest are female. And when he decided to go for this degree, although he's very passionate about the subject, there were teachers and quite a few other people who told him that maybe it wouldn't be a good choice for him because that's a female subject. That's something that girls typically do. So we had the conversation about AI and how his studies and studying literature and having an analytical mind actually will, maybe, one day get him to work in technology, because it's super important to have a different perspective, especially as we move into the world where AI is becoming part of our everyday life.
And surely, I mean, we talked a little bit about backgrounds. Anna, you've lived in lots of different countries. That's going to give you a different perspective and different experiences. And are organisations looking much broader when they're recruiting now?
It's interesting. It's still something that, unfortunately, it's almost still a dictate or a mandate. You know, we set up these metrics about, you know, a diverse slate when we're looking at recruiting. I think it goes further than that, going back to the product discussion, though. You know, even when we look at functional biases, and, you know, every type of industry I've worked in, every company I've worked in, I see functional bias. You know, I was actually doing some training the other day with our grads. And I walked in, and a couple of them, they're all coders, and they're all busy spinning on their seats, like literally. And I just ignored it because, you know, it's the way their brains are working, and it doesn't really bother me that much. But to me, it was interesting. Halfway through, one of them said, "Do you know what? This is actually interesting. I thought HR was just airy, fairy, fluffy stuff." And the others thought it was hilarious, but to me it was interesting because there is that bias when you look at functions and whether somebody's analytical, whether they're structural, intuitive, relational, whatever that is. But if you think about your product, you're trying to reach every aspect of humanity. If you're working in hospitality, education, government, whatever it is, you're still trying to reach the world's population. So your employee base has to reflect society. Otherwise, how are you going to hit them all? So when you get a new product, a great way, like Away's just mentioned it, Lucy mentioned it, that they're helping their employees understand what their offering is. People that give their feedback from a different perspective from whoever developed it are going to have good ideas on things you might have missed. You know, you show me some new product, as I said, I'm not a very technical person, but if you explain to me this is how it's going to work when you call a contact center, I, as a customer, I'm probably going to give you feedback on what that looks like. We were talking about it earlier, you know, I was saying my 86-year-old mum loves Alexa. It's a new best friend. She lives at home on her own. She tells her when she's going out, when she's come back. And it's now so friendly. It says, "Welcome home, we missed you, kitty." And she loves it. It's, you know, and those things aren't small things. I've had a lot of friends now buy Alexas just to help their parents that are older and alone. And it gives them a sense of connectivity. And as daft as that sounds, it's a different concept of using the technology. And so I feel like we miss out a lot when we don't hire differently from our own perception. We tend to look at the world through our own lens, and we think it's all good as long as we're reflecting it. But we're not reflecting the world at large. And that's key when we recruit. And it's key when we're looking at internal promotions, as I mentioned before. But just think about it. If you go out with a new product and you share that with every piece of your employee base, you are going to get new ideas. You're going to get innovation. You're going to get feedback. You might not like it. Most of us don't. But it's that feedback that will innovate you further. And that's a piece that I think diversity misses out on a lot when it's just made political rather than useful.
And do you know, I couldn't agree more. And it's I think it's really easy to stereotype, especially in technology companies. And I'm going to come to you, Vicky, because I mean it's the stereotypical role for an introvert would be a software developer. A stereotypical role for an extrovert might be a salesperson, and maybe there's a few in the room. But maybe we need to break that down. Vicky, I'm sure you've got a view on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we should bin the whole thing, to be quite honest. We're way beyond that. And I think it's where we take the conversation on diversity where it needs to get. So neurodiversity, how important it is to understand our employees, how they communicate, how they receive information, and how they react to certain things. And I think businesses are more aware, but I'm not sure that we're doing enough to really embrace that, because it's back to the psychological safety, but actually it's the me you can't see, which we all rock up with different moods, different feelings. There was, Bruce was saying, when you're told to do something, the stress rather than when you want to do something. And that's exasperated if you're on the spectrum. So we need to be able to recognize this and understand it, even to the point that one of my team is dyslexic. So when we're having meetings and conversations, I need to be aware that she can't write down things and make notes. So we look at recording things, we look at different ways. She signs off her email made by dyslexia, so please excuse the humour, because half the time it's just funny things come out from it. And until we actually open it up, it is beyond, without a doubt, diversity is important. We all understand that Rebel Ideas, we need better teams with more diverse members to get creativity and innovation. But that's okay for the extroverts. What about actually embracing everybody in the room and understanding that it has an impact? Even to the point recently, without oversharing too much, my ex-husband and my 2 daughters and I all did an online course, online questionnaire for autism, and 2 turned out to be highly likely to be autistic and 2 not. And even that, and a family environment goes, oh, that's why we keep having fights, because the 2 that aren't fight with the 2 that are, because they are different. We think differently, we communicate differently, we react differently. And I think it's on us as employers to make sure that we can provide a really good space, recognise that, and make sure that it is truly inclusive. It's not just about men and women and ethnicity, it's about everybody. We really need to put our arms around everyone.
So how can we create these spaces where everybody feels safe? We do have inclusion and that diversity. How do we create that?
It starts with leadership. It has to come from the top down. It also has to come from the bottom up. But as leaders, it's our responsibility, as I like to say, kind of pick the people off the sticky floor and help them raise up. And being able to create that safe environment, being different is something that should be celebrated. Being able to speak out and not fear for having an opinion, or being able to actually say, yes, I have dyslexia. Why not, right? Why should you have to come to work and keep that underneath? You need to bring your best person forward. And as leaders, that's our responsibility. And coming back full circle, education is so important to that. And we need to continue to invest.
I think though as well, it's what Bruce was saying about community and inclusion and culture. Yeah. It's got to be throughout everything that we do at
and
work.
At the same time, as leaders, we actually have to encourage people to be different and to speak up, even though they feel, there's all the whole idea about disagree and commit. That's how we get creative. Exactly. That's how we get innovation, not by agreeing all the time or being the same. It's by actually disagreeing in the first place and then coming up with something that works.
And it is the grit and the oyster, right? It is that whole piece to create the pearl, and you've got to be able to give that space to do it.
Exactly.
One of the things that really hit me just recently actually is, I was talking about, hybrid work environments, working virtually, and what suits people. And I'm always asked the same questions: is hybrid here to stay? Or are you going to go totally virtual? Or are you going to go back in the office? And what we discovered when we first went back to work, there was a push. Our new CEO wanted us all back in the office, and there was absolute uproar. Now, he'd retired and has come back into the workforce. He missed COVID, so he hadn't gone through that transition that many of us had. But we're also different, and what's really interesting to me is I'm a social being, I suppose. I'm extroverted, so I get my energy from being around other people. So working from home is not my favorite thing to do. But if you think about it, up until COVID, we really, for the most part, expected everyone to go into an office. For a lot of people, working in an office environment surrounded by other people is not comfortable, and we've never considered it. We thought it's the right thing to do. And when COVID started coming to an end, it was like, right, the right thing to do is go back to the right way to work. We had to stop and say, is it the right thing? Not everybody is comfortable in a work environment, COVID or no COVID. Some people need their own space. They need that peace. If they're on the spectrum, even more so, very often that interference is very troubling and disturbing. So COVID actually, in this respect, was beneficial to many work environments. It's given us options and opportunities, but opening up different ways of communicating is also critical. So we can ask people's opinion, but not everyone is going to speak up. Not everyone is going to sit on a stage. Some people need a different way to express themselves, whether it's surveys or, use a chatbot to get your feedback, whatever it is. But you need to allow people that opportunity to speak up and say what's making them uncomfortable, not just what's making them comfortable. We're very good at saying what you like, not so good at saying what's not working, and that's what we got to get better at.
Any more advice from the panel before, if we have time to go to any comments from the audience? Any more advice?
I guess I would just say, look, just go out there and be different, you know, until you try it and actually give it a go and go out of your comfort zone. You'd be really surprised. So when I did change my name to Peter, the first reaction was that actually I was going to change my gender. My husband was the one that actually had the worst reaction. Quite interesting. And then my daughter was like, oh my God, you're really going to change, Mummy. You know, until you do something, that creates conversation, right? I didn't intend for that to be. The other piece was obviously, my surname is Kay, so Peter Kay was the whole thing that kind of also helped. And I did say I'd get garlic bread in my sentence today, so I've definitely achieved my objective. But yeah, just go out there and absolutely try it and go out of your comfort zone.
I think that's it. It is thinking differently and allowing yourself to think differently and allowing yourself to have those conversations that you might feel a bit uncomfortable having because you don't know what you don't know.
I think as well, just to add though, just to keep talking and have empathy, I think if we can take a moment to think about what's happened to the person in front of us before they came into the room, before they joined the meeting, it will really help with that understanding because we've no idea what people bring with them. And rather than judging them for it, why not ask, are you okay? Do you need to take a moment? Do you want to reschedule? Do something that's supportive. And the more you do that, the more of a safe space it is and people feel comfortable to be authentic at work.